Hey guys, it is Wednesday evening. I hope everyone's having a great day. I don't normally do these kinds of videos on immediate current events and solo videos with just me talking, but with the situation going on with Novak Djokovic, I feel compelled to do one. And so I'm doing one. And I want to try to present a broad, holistic picture of what is going on here. I'm by no means completely neutral on the situation, but I've been observing tennis and world politics and Novak Djokovic for many, many years. And I feel like I can give sort of like maybe just a different take on some of this than any of the people who are looking at it strictly from either a tennis point of view or a politics or a pro or an anti-vax point of view. I'm not professing to not have my own opinions on any of these things. I definitely do, but I feel like I can put myself into a certain degree of neutral for this to kind of go through some things about Novak Djokovic that people who don't follow tennis might not know, and people who do follow tennis, including some of the top podcasts about tennis that I've watched on the internet over the last few days, seem to have forgotten or not understand about him. And I think going through this will give people a better picture of who he is, the entirety of the bind he is, maybe why he does what he does and feels the way he does, and why the extreme reaction to him by everybody is a sign of serious imbalance in the world that really we should take a deeper look at, regardless of what your opinion about all of this is. I'm going to avoid discussing the merits or lack of merits or the efficacy or non-efficacy of said medical countermeasure for a variety of reasons. But I actually think that it doesn't really have that much to do with the whole situation. I may say stuff about that in another video on another platform, but not here tonight with this. So anywho, all right, I'm going to give a little bit of background on Novak Djokovic's history. I've been watching tennis since the mid to late 90s. I was not a tennis player. I am a terrible tennis player. I am absolutely obsessed with watching it, both from an enjoyment of sport and respect as an athlete kind of thing, but also there's something special and unique and metaphysical and like, I don't know about the game. It's kind of like the ultimate battle of wills. It's like the duel to the end kind of thing that I really enjoy. I myself was a gymnast. At this point, I much prefer watching tennis to watching gymnastics. I love gymnastics, but that sport has been destroyed through corruption and politics and nonsense as well. So these days, I really watch a lot more tennis, but I was a reasonably high-level gymnast. I do have NCAA competition experience, so I feel somewhat qualified to assess athletics and comment on them as well. Anyway, I've been observing tennis, watching it on television since the mid to late 90s was when I really got into it, maybe a little bit more when I was a kid, but just in just general. And I've been watching Novak Djokovic since, he was a teenager. At times I've been a Novak Djokovic fan. At times I've been not a Novak Djokovic fan. My opinion about him, both as a player and as a person, has continued to evolve over the course of his career in a different way than my thoughts and feelings about other players have. And I might talk about that a little bit as well. But I was introduced to him as a very, very talented teenager who endeared himself to the audience, if not the other players, by doing these impressions of the other players that were very, very funny. And, the crowd seemed to like them. Later, it became obvious maybe some of the players didn't. And that may have been the start of some of his lack of popularity in the locker room with some people. I don't know. They were quite funny. And he was always a really talented young player. He displayed obviously great athletic ability and flexibility and physicality in a different way than some of the other top players. And he was always really good. And he actually even won a major pretty early in his career before having several years that would pass before he won another. But during that period of time, obviously he was coming up in an era just a little bit behind Federer and Nadal, who have been the most popular and most dominant players in history. And, by the time he really arrived, those two camps were pretty well set. It was like Coke and Pepsi, and there's not really much room for RC or Tab or whatever, even if those actually maybe tasted better or were better. I don't know. People were pretty firmly either Federer or Nadal, and that was a very respectful rivalry. And so Novak Djokovic was kind of like the third wheel to that party. And for a long time, he couldn't penetrate their dominance, even though he had that one early major win. He struggled for a period of time after that to sort of find himself and find his game. And part of what I recall about this was he often struggled with fitness and the ability to finish matches, and then the ability to also cope with it when he didn't do well, and sometimes would claim some kind of sickness or injury that the media and maybe the other players were not quite sure if what the truth to that actually was. And this all, in my opinion, came to a head in a match many years ago in Australia. I want to say it was 2009, but it could have been 8 or 10, against Andy Roddick. He struggled through. He was not able to finish the match. He clearly was lacking fitness and stamina, and something was, amiss. And it wasn't the first time he had kind of gotten into this, although it was definitely the worst. And a lot of times this would rear its head in matches against Andy Roddick, who was a particularly bad matchup for him for a variety of reasons. At the time, I was a huge Andy Roddick fan. And so I kind of saw Novak as a poor sport. And I didn't know a lot of the things that I know about body and energy and stuff like that then. So I didn't immediately identify that he was struggling with something physically or nutritionally. It was just like he couldn't handle it. And my feeling was like he couldn't handle it, and he was a poor sport, and he had a bad attitude, and yay, Andy Roddick won, some kind of ridiculous thing like that. And those sort of struggles kind of continued, it seemed like, for like the rest of the year, but it's sort of the next year started to get kind of better. And what we had heard from what was reported in the news, and people were not talking about this yesterday when they were talking about what possibly could be the reason for a medical exemption, was that when he started to improve, one of the things he mentioned was that he was now on a gluten-free diet. And he, I think at the time he was asked about why the gluten-free diet helped. Did he have a condition? And at that time, way back in 2010, he was already saying, my medical situation is private. So this desire for medical privacy has been a consistent thing in his career, not a new thing that's just happening now around vaccination or whatever. And, but I know from my own history, my own research, and my own work, I am a nutrition consultant. I don't claim to be a doctor or like super like PhD level educated on this, but I've had my own struggle with nutrition. And I was mentored by someone who deals with a lot of things like autoimmune diseases and long-term chronic illnesses that are remedied by diet from the naturopathic or holistic, perspective. And one of the things that I've learned is that there's a couple of possibilities when you're dealing with someone who found resolution with a gluten-free diet, right? And that would be that it's possible he either has celiac disease, or if doesn't have celiac disease, he has the gene that indicates that he could develop it. Either one of those situations would lead to, if he were to correct his diet by removing gluten, he probably would feel better and therefore be able to perform better on a number of levels. The other thing with celiac, or the gene for celiac, is a lot of people who have that also have what's known as the MTHFR genetic defect, which is a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to go into, and I don't know enough about to speak intelligently about, other than I'm aware that it's a thing that exists and commonly co-occurs with people who have celiac disease. And that leads to, there's a whole bunch of other problems that go along with that also seem to be able to be resolved by eating a particular kind of diet that generally includes excluding gluten. So that's kind of one or two options right there, but they're kind of the same. The other is that he has some particular autoimmune condition that also can be resolved sometimes by changing your diet and your lifestyle. And when I say lifestyle, I mean, that's like a wide variety of things. For some people, that might include, exercise, sauna, dry bath, meditation, removing the mercury from your teeth. There's a million things people do to change the way that they're living and change their diet if they've decided that they don't want to go with a allopathic or Western medicine solution, or they've gone that way and not found resolution, or maybe they found resolution to the main problem, but it opened up a can of worms on another problem, right? And so people often turn to holistic doctors or people with experience with alternative diets to help them change their diet to combat whatever symptoms they're experiencing based on the autoimmune condition. Venus Williams has also expressed this, right? She has Sjogren's syndrome, and she resolved a lot of her problems through a raw diet. I don't know if she did it other standard Western medical stuff or if she just did all Eastern diet stuff, but we've heard her talk about that as well. So those are two things that I'm well aware of that can be remediated through gluten-free diet or certain kinds of clean diet, certain kinds of diets and lifestyle changes. And he seemed to make that correction. And within a year of that correction, 2011 came and he was a different player. And that was the first year he went on just like an absolute tear. And we've seen him go on these tears that usually last a couple of years, and then he recedes for a little bit and then comes back. And what I will say about Novak Djokovic, he has never been my favorite tennis player on the court. I've always been more of a Nadal fan. I find the style of tennis that Nadal plays is more sort of fiery and exciting. I always liked Djokovic, but like I never rooted for him. I was happy before I was a big Nadal fan, I was an erotic fan. At a certain point that became frustrating. And so I was simultaneously erotic and a Nadal fan, but I wasn't really a Djokovic fan, but I was an anti-Djokovic, right? I had to acknowledge to myself that when the beast that we now know as Novak Djokovic showed himself around the 2011 period and 2013, whatever, I looked at this guy and I'm like, this is a terrifying monster. And I'm having trouble admitting this to myself. But if he's on his game, Robert, Roger, Rafa, whatever, watch out. Like when I look at them, I see them scared of Novak Djokovic in a way that I don't see him scared of them per se, right? And so when he corrected his diet, within a year or two of that, we suddenly had this different player that is incredibly fit and able to go the distance over and over and over again, but also seemed to be able to solve problems mentally on the court that prior he hadn't been able to. And brain fog, clear thinking, self-confidence, all of this kind of stuff comes along with orthomolecular nutrition and psychiatry, correcting your diet through having the right things in your body, and also feeling good about being able to improve your physical and mental situation yourself, right? And I saw that happen with him. So that's kind of some background on, his rise as a player and also his previous health conditions that I think have been overlooked in this situation. And if you have either of those health conditions, I know that there's a lot of doctors that would say, well, neither of those things are medical doctors are excuses for not getting a vaccine. But the people who have those conditions know that part of what was prescribed to them by whoever helped them solve their health problem was to keep things that are synthetic, not natural, that are what we consider to be toxic or, irritants or whatever to the body, to not have them, right? To not eat food that has, MSG or chemicals or whatever inside of it, to not put products on your body that has chemicals. And certainly you don't want to inject chemicals that you wouldn't otherwise take into your body. I can just say that when a person goes through having to find solutions outside of conventional or Western means or medical establishment to their problem, there tends to be a greater awakening process on many levels that goes along with that. You start looking for answers or solutions to problems that aren't being solved in other places, and you start applying that to other parts of reality as well. And it is pretty common for people who have resolved a health issue through eating, through diet and natural means, to not then want to go put a syringe full of unknown chemicals in their body, even if someone else is saying they should or they have to or whatever. It's like, no, dude, I worked really hard to fix this. I'm not going to put that at risk. And so it's pretty common to see what he's doing. All right. So on another level, let's see. So it's probably been a hard thing. I know it's been a hard thing for him to be the best player in the world, but to really not be loved by the public or the fans. He obviously has like some rabid followers who do love him, but in general, he's never achieved the same level of fame or love that Roger Federer or Nadal has received. And that's hard. That's got to have been hard for him to be so dominant and to always be being rooted against by the crowd. That can't be fun. But in his case, it seemed to serve, once that became the narrative and sort of the rhythm of things, he learned how to use that. And so it's made him a better player. And I think that, people are afraid to face him on the court. It's very hard to beat him. When he's playing well, like, I don't doubt him. When I watch other players, even players who have like more overtime, like Nadal, when they're playing, even when they're playing well, I see signs of doubt, especially when they're playing him. And I don't have that same level of confidence that they're going to win when I watch them play as I do with him often. So he's managed to use that, to alchemize that, to bring out his best tennis. But what I've noticed is he became used to being an outsider in the tennis realm. And at the same time, he went through this healing journey for whatever the medical condition is, which we don't know earlier. And he started to do other things that I also started to do when I went on an alternative healing journey, right? He started to look at metaphysics and spirituality and probably some different aspects of world politics and whatnot. And he developed a different opinion about those things than most people have, just like he has a different opinion about the body and medicine. And this is not unusual. And so it's consistent with who he is. And I've heard him talk about all sorts of alternative kinds of topics, and whether he's right or not isn't the issue, right? This is who he is and what he believes, and it has no bearing on his ability to play tennis and whether he should be allowed to play tennis and should he be able to participate in the world. And a lot of people are going through that right now. He's just maybe the most famous one, and in a unique position because it's hard to say this isn't a healthy person when you see somebody who performs the way he is. If he were saying the things he's saying and he was fat, out of shape, in and out of the hospital with all sorts of problems, not able to take care of himself or whatever, it's a different thing. But this is like quite literally possibly the finest athlete in the world, and probably, and I'm sure there's lots of controversy at this, but probably the best tennis player that's ever lived and ever will live. And as much as I love Rafael Nadal, at the end of the day, Novak Djokovic is just, it's more exciting for me to watch Rafa when he's playing really well. But Djokovic has displayed like a dominance and like something different that when I watch him, I'm just like, this guy's fucking incredible, right? And the people who demean Djokovic and say he cheats and all that, that's fucking bullshit, right? Like, he's an incredible athlete, and whether you like his personality or you don't like his personality, it means nothing. Like, he's the most terrifying tennis player in the world, probably. So which takes us, and this has been something he's struggled with over the years. There's been times when like he just would do anything to get the crowd to love him. And that's opened him up to criticism from other tennis players. There's other tennis players who say like Novak Djokovic really helped me. Like when I didn't have money to train, he gave it to me. He is known for trying to start the PTPA, which is basically trying to help the lower ranked tennis players get paid more, even if it means he gets paid less. So I don't think he's a selfish person who only cares about himself. I think that's not true. It's been very interesting to watch him develop from a young player who kind of couldn't cope with it when he didn't do well and sort of appeared to be like making excuses for himself for a bit of a poor sport, into someone who's alchemized all of that into becoming the person that he is now. This brings us to the current situation. And when I say the current situation, I don't just mean what's happening this week and today with the Australian Open, though I'm going to get to that. I mean the pandemic of the last couple of years, right? There is a whole host of people, right, that feel that they have been forced to live a reality that they don't believe is true for the last 2 years. And what one's opinion about that is or isn't doesn't matter. We are all people, right? And there's no person who is like, would ever say that, like, you know, well, there was people who've said this in history, but we've decided that that's not okay, that these people should be persecuted because they practice a religion that I don't believe in, or somebody should be forced to practice a religion. Most people in the West are like, you know, not for forced religion or forced, you know, other than this really forced medical procedures, right? A lot of people who say a lot of really harsh things about Novak Djokovic are abortion rights activists. Right. And if you think a person should not have to have a baby in their body, why do you think it's okay to force chemicals into somebody's body? I think it's a question you should ask. Now, some people, you know, I'm not getting into all of this, but we either have bodily autonomy or we don't. And, you know, you can disagree with me, you can not like me for saying that or whatnot, but, you know, this is not a small thing, right? He doesn't believe this is good for him. And people are saying if he doesn't do something he thinks will hurt him, he shouldn't be able to play or participate in the world in the same way that the people who are doing what they're told to do. I've been very disappointed to hear, you know, some players have chosen to be neutral about this, and that's fine. But some of the other top players have spoken out against people who choose not to get vaccinated. And these are like people who live privileged lives. And they're basically saying, like, no, everybody needs to do the thing that I think is right, or the thing that the government or whatever is saying is right. And, you know, it's amazing to me how many people that I like and respect for other reasons are so comfortable with giving over their right to choose about what happens with their body to the media or the government or what other famous people say or don't say or whatnot. We have not done this before in the West. Sure, this has been done in other, like, you know, this is part of what's gone on in, you know, I don't want to bring up the things in history because people get mad when you compare it to that, but it always starts with something like this, right? And we've never said a person can't play tennis before because they haven't done this shot or that shot, or they have this or don't, or they agree with me or don't disagree with me. This is a slippery slope. And rather than people being upset about Novak Djokovic going into Australia, and I'm going to get there in a second, with an exemption, they should be upset about all the Australian people that were locked in their houses for 2 years and being forced to do something they don't want to do if they want to survive, right? I'm very disturbed at how, I don't care if you like the vaccine, don't like the vaccine, you want it, don't want it, or whatever. It's that people can't accept or respect people who feel differently. And they say, well, they can choose not to have it and they just don't get to participate. Well, what if things were reversed? And, you know, and that could happen, right? That suddenly it's decided that the countermeasures aren't good and that the people who've taken them aren't safe and that they need to be quarantined. How would you feel about that? Right? So some balance is in order here. But we've all been on some level. I don't think there's any place in the world that hasn't been affected by this. And we've all had massive restrictions placed on our lives and have, you know, that's been one thing for the people who are scared and agree with the things that the government and the media and the power structure are saying. But for people who disagree, it's like we've been forced to practice a religion that we don't believe in, right? And we just want to go on with our normal lives, right? This was never something we would have accepted before. People don't want to accept it now. You know, And I also think that people who are scared of it and want to do all these measures and whatever, they should be allowed to do that, but they shouldn't be dictating reality for the rest of us. I respect everyone in my family has a different opinion about this than I do. And I respect their opinions and I let them do their thing. And so far, they're pretty much letting me do my thing, even though right now we're having to do it mostly separately. I think people should be free to choose, but, civil society shouldn't be blocked off from people who do something a little differently. That's just my opinion, but I respect everybody else's choices for themselves. So during this period of time, he tried to create opportunities for, lower ranked players that didn't have a huge cash stash to fall back on. So he planned this tour in 2020 and people ended up getting sick and whatever. And a lot of people really came down on him hard for that. And during that period of time, he also expressed suspicion or desire to not have countermeasures forced on him or to, he also talked a lot about natural health and what he likes to do with his body. He's even expressed that he felt uncomfortable with having had to receive elbow surgery a couple of years back. I don't know if that's just a person who really likes natural health and believes in that in his body. I don't know if he's religious. I don't know if he's maybe a Christian Scientist or a Jehovah's Witness. I don't think he's a Jehovah's Witness. Maybe he's a Christian Scientist, or maybe he's like in some kind of new age religion. I don't know. I'm not a religious person. I don't make my decisions that way, but making them that way, making them that way is reasonable for people who believe that and whatnot. So I don't know. I see him interested in a lot of spiritual and metaphysical things that seem to emanate from the East or from unorthodox or unconventional or alternative sources. I'm interested in some of that stuff too. I just don't have a religious relationship with it necessarily. But I also seem to see him questioning power. And that's normal for a person who's been in his position. There's an establishment in tennis, just like there's an establishment in the world. And I think he's suspicious of the order in tennis and he's suspicious of the order in the world. And I think with all the crap that's gone on in our lifetimes, that's a reasonable position to hold. I don't know what his actual opinions about some of these things are. I've heard him talk about a few things. But because he's always the one in tennis who's not liked, it's very easy to say, he, did something disrespectful by having this tour. He's an anti-vaxxer and we shouldn't accept that. And he's crazy and his beliefs are bad or wrong or whatever. The guy's obviously doing something right? He's an incredible athlete. And he seems to know a lot of things about reality in the world. And whether you agree with them or not is not the issue. This is not like some dumb guy who doesn't read. Okay. So let's see. As to what's going on immediately right now, okay? He said some things about vaccination early on in the pandemic that weren't received well. And from then he realized no matter what I say, someone's going to hate me. If I say I'm vaccinated or say I like them, then the people who thought I was an anti-vaxxer, they're going to be mad. If I speak out against the vaccinations, then the establishment is going to hate me even more than they already do. Do I care about that? I don't know if I care about that as long as I get to play, but it seems like that's even questionable now. So what line do I toe? And then there's also been this thing about privacy that came up, and he's like, I don't want to reveal my status. And I don't know if he doesn't want to reveal his status because he was hoping to evade some of these problems, or he really believes in medical privacy, which is something he expressed all the way back in 2010 when he declined to state what the condition he was taking a gluten-free diet for. So this is consistent with his behavior over time. And the longer this went on, right, because this Australian Open is in Australia, which has arguably been the most authoritarian and the most illiberal, undemocratic, and just downright awful to their people during the course of this lockdown. And I know that most of you people who refer to mainstream media sources don't see this. But there are people protesting against what the government does all the time. There are people giving their reports of, having lost their jobs and not being able to leave their house because they don't want to, either they don't want to or they can't take the vaccine. There's been people who've been sent to quarantine camps when they didn't even have COVID, just because they've been around people who do and have been treated like they're prisoners and whatnot. We should all be speaking out against what's been going on in Australia, other countries as well. But right now we're talking about Australia. Even if you are pro-vaccine, you can be pro-vaccine and anti-mandate. You can be pro-vaccine and anti-authoritarian dictatorship. You can be both things simultaneously. And so he, I don't know if he was hoping that there would be some greater awakening in the world and the restrictions would be lifted and he wouldn't have to deal with this. I don't know if he, obviously he was able to get a medical exemption. So I don't know if he just would prefer not to do that. I don't know why he did what he did and why he made such a secret of like where he was at in that process. Other than it's entirely possible that this is also for him part of a stand up for freedom of choice and privacy for everyone, which I support him in. And it's fine if people don't, but it's consistent in some ways with his behavior. There also seems to be not consistent statements that have been made for the last few months from Tennis Australia, from the Victorian government, and then the federal government of Australia. And so that plays into it as well. Now, what's going on in the last 24 hours is he was granted a medical exemption from Tennis Australia and the Victorian government so that he could come play. So he traveled to Australia. There's been a huge backlash from the Australian people and some of the other players. And then he arrived there and they said that there was a problem with his visa based on whoever applied for his visa in his camp applied for the wrong kind of visa. And it's not the kind that allows medical exemptions. So whatever the Victorian and the Tennis Australia did doesn't matter. He doesn't have the right thing to go through. Now, that may be true, right? If this is a visa issue, like it should be able to be corrected without there having to be this like dramatic Edward Snowden holding him, being deported, whatever kind of situation at the airport. But also, one of the things that Craig Tiley from Tennis Australia has acknowledged is that there are other players and people working at the tournament that have gotten vaccine exemptions. So why aren't people mad at them, right? Now, I agree that there's been a lot of drama around this, and some of it has been created by the media and some of it has been created by Novak, but in some ways it almost doesn't matter what he's done. The media is really programmed to be suspicious of Novak Djokovic and not like him, think he's a crazy anti-vaxxer. I will say that John Wertheim just this week did a reasonably fair article that I thought was a really good article about Novak Djokovic for Sports Illustrated. But other than that, like almost uniformly, the media is anti whatever Novak is doing, right? So it's hard to assess if he's being over dramatic or what is happening. But if there are players or people in Australia who feel that they've had to live through harsh lockdowns and had to take a vaccine and they're upset because he didn't, then A, they should be upset with all of the other people who are there who have been exempted, or B, and this is what I really think, they need to ask themselves this question about why they allowed themselves to be locked down, right? Because they did all the things. They did all the things to try and keep it away, and it came anyway, right? Everybody has got the new variant, whether you've had all the pokes, haven't had any of the pokes, had some of the pokes, and not other of the pokes, took the, whatever kind of thing, did natural stuff, did pharmaceutical stuff. It seems like everybody has it now. And so this has all been like on some level, a whole lot of nonsense. And that doesn't mean that bad things haven't happened to people and people haven't been sick or whatever, right? But you cannot stop the world because of fear of something like this. This is not something we've ever accepted before. I don't think we should have accepted it now. And I don't think we should accept it going forward. And for people to say, I am mad at you because I had to do something to my body and you found a way to not do it, is displacing feelings and anger, right? Like, we are all different and we don't all have to do the same thing, but we are all people and we should be able to respect each other and respect each other's choices. For the past however many years he's been on the tour, almost 20, he could have gone into any tournament carrying some germs or some sickness or some disease, and nobody was worried about that. That's part of the risk of life, And so for everybody to be so disturbed with him about this feels like a lot of displaced feelings. I have critiques of Novak as well, right? I think he should, this is my personal opinion, I don't think he needs to reveal his medical status. I think he's always been private when it comes to that, and he can maintain that. But I've heard him express off to the side and in small ways that he thinks everybody should have the freedom to choose, that this is about personal choice. And I think he should be stronger in that position. And I think there's an argument that could be made that, like, maybe it would have been more powerful for him to boycott this or any tournament that was requiring people to be vaccinated, or some of these tournaments required the patrons to be vaccinated, but not the players. And that's the height of hypocrisy and not freedom and not equality and all of that kind of stuff. So sometimes I thought, well, maybe he should boycott and be, a more sort of stern voice for personal freedom for everybody. Right? Maybe he should have used all of the attention that has been on him over the last few weeks, waiting to hear what was going to happen, to say what's happened to the Australian people is tragic, right? And to speak up for them. Everybody's been concerned over the last few months, and probably rightfully so, about what's been going on with Peng Shuai, who lives under an authoritarian dictatorship in China, and whether or not she is okay. And people have been speaking out for her and willing to sacrifice sponsorships and money and things like that in order to do that. And I don't know exactly what the truth of the situation is with Peng Shuai, but it seems like that's the right thing to do. I think it's very, very sad that there are not more tennis players speaking out about what's been happening to people in Australia and many places all over the world. And so I have sometimes had hopes or been critical of Novak for not taking a stronger stance on that. Then there's part of me that feels like, well, maybe the idea is to go down there, play, win, and then say something. I don't know if that's the truth or not. Like, I had hoped he'd do that in New York, but he didn't win. And so I don't know if it's less powerful if you don't win. He also finally got applause from the crowd in New York. And so it was this kind of weird thing that they appreciated him when he lost, but they hate him when he wins. Balancing all this stuff for him, where you're always playing against your opponent and everyone else, and then also having a set of beliefs that's different than most of the other people, and trying to balance standing up for yourself and maybe others who are a little different, with you're trying to make history as the best tennis player that's ever lived. It's hard. Those are hard choices that have to be made. And I don't know. I don't know what his reasoning is. I would love to have a conversation with him. Novak, if you see this video and you want to have a chat, right? I have lots of ideas about you that are interesting and unusual, and you might find at least entertaining or whatever. I'd love to chat with you. But I don't know why he's doing what he's doing. But I have seen people, well-known people who have, the entirety of whatever their establishment is, whether it be in Hollywood or in sports or something in politics, have everyone go against them. And when they're trying to do the right thing or a brave thing. And whether you agree with Novak or not, and whether you agree with how he's handled this or not, it's hard to go against the establishment. It's hard to do, the people who just go along. Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer didn't speak out for Peng Shuai. They haven't said much about the vaccination thing. Rafa said a little bit only when he was pressed. It's easier to do that. It's easier to go along and get along. It is hard to be the odd man out and think something different than everybody else and stand strong in that position. Brings us to today, where he's sitting there in the airport. We don't know what's going on, more drama on the situation. It's unclear as to whether this is really about medical exemption or whether it's about the wrong visa, or I would like to sort of propose that it might even be about something else, and that the world is in a different kind of struggle than what's being presented, that there are factions. And I think we saw this at the Olympics. I had this opinion and I didn't really ever make any videos going deeply into it. Just, it's difficult to get as much content out as I do and be able to keep up with everything moment to moment. But I think we were seeing signs of unconventional asymmetrical warfare. And I know that people out there who don't think, who have a certain view of sports as it's just a game, don't understand how that plays into world domination and power and the world order and all that kind of stuff. and then people who are really into sports, but like really just haven't examined world politics and systems of control, don't see how our athletes are archetypes that represent greater things. You just need to look at who some of the athletes are allied with to see their connection to power. And I think some of that may be going on here. And there are thousands and thousands of people, hundreds, millions of people worldwide who are fighting for their right to participate in society and to be able to make choices for themselves. And Novak Djokovic is an archetype that represents that. And, you know, so there's more going on than just Novak and will he play or will he not play? And the decisions that are made around this are important for people beyond just him. It's not about tennis anymore. But, you know, if he plays, that's the battlefield that like sort of the spirit or the will decides things on to a certain extent, right? And I have more to say about that, but maybe I'll keep for another video. So kind of in wrapping this up, like I don't have like a right thing that I know that is what should happen here, right? I obviously think the Australian Open will not be the same without the person who's won it 9 or 10 other times. And whoever would end up winning if he doesn't play, it will be the asterisk, but Novak Djokovic didn't play. And probably a lot of people would be okay with that because they don't like Novak Djokovic or whatever it is. But what's happening is sad here, not just for tennis, but for the world. And it's very, very sad to see people making fun of him, you know, like not understanding. A lot of people who call people anti-vaxxers and who like, there's literally an article or a tweet up from from sports journalist Ben Rothenberg that says, let's not lose sight of how wildly anti-science Novak Djokovic has publicly been for years. Here he was last year preaching about how you can change water with emotion. Naive, but maybe these real consequences today can be a reality check for his nonsense. That's one school of thought, but there's another school of thought that knows about the Emoto experiences with water, that listens to Novak Djokovic talk about the research he's done into Nikola Tesla. He sits on the Nikola Tesla Foundation, right? He just believes in a different kind of science. We've been having this battle in our world also from the beginning of time. For those of you who like me for my more woo takes on things, I'll be continuing this conversation in a live stream on my locals page on Friday at emilymoyer.locals.com. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern. And I will be talking about some more deep woo about what I think may be going on here. But, you know, Tesla believed in one kind of energy and Edison believed in another kind, and the elite liked the Edison kind because it allowed, you know, metering and monitoring and control of access to energy for the controlling access to energy for the people. Whereas what Nikola Tesla was proposing would have been something quite different, where people would have been able to be sovereign in their use of energy and not being able to be controlled by systems of power in the same way. And people today, they think Tesla is a car. And I mean, it is, but most people who are like Elon Musk fanboys, and actually Novak sits on a board of the Tesla Foundation with Elon Musk, but most people who are attracted to what Elon Musk is doing don't actually understand the science behind what Nikola Tesla was doing. I have listened to Novak Djokovic talk about it. He understands it. Lots of people think the idea of free energy is quackery and are happy to continue to live under the systems of energy oppression that we live under. And that's fine too. Like, we should all get to choose. Like, we live in a world where sort of everything, you know, the universe sort of allows everything. It's people that make all these rules. And, you know, I'm not against all rules, but just because you don't believe something doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I see a lot of people here who don't actually know that much about the body, that much about, you know, the entirety of what's going on here, saying that everyone else should have to live by the thing that either they believe based on their own research and decisions, or that they have been brainwashed into believing by government and media who lie. who just lie about everything, right? They just do. And no matter what side of the political divide or the COVID divide you find yourself on, if you don't think media and government lies to you, I can't help you. So anyway, that's kind of, where I'm going to leave this. Those are some more things to know about Novak Djokovic. He's still not my favorite player, certainly not on the court, though I do enjoy watching him figure it out every time. But he is my favorite player off the court now. And I have been really disappointed in some of the things that players that I love on the court, like Andy Murray, like Rafael Nadal, or whatever, have had to say over the course of the last 2 years. But I try to keep things separate. So I respect them on the court. I don't care for the lack of respect they have for people who think differently than they do off the court. And, I don't see Novak Djokovic going around telling people that if they get vaccinated, they shouldn't be able to play. So his stance on freedom and personal choice is more in line with mine, but I understand not everybody feels that way. It's just something to consider. And whether you like Novak Djokovic or dislike him or think he's right or wrong about this issue, I do feel that, people should respect this guy. He is an incredible talent, and he has gone against the grain. It would be easier for him to just do what everyone else does and to be, if not loved, accepted. And he's not doing that. And that's hard. And that's hard, and it builds character and all of this kind of stuff. And we all sometimes have to stand up for something we believe in that makes us unpopular with people. And whether it's an intelligent thing we believe in or an unintelligent or right or wrong isn't the issue. It takes courage to stand up for what you believe in. I encourage him to stand up in a more bold, even more bold fashion. And I hope somebody with a large platform sits down for a lengthy, meaningful conversation with him that is about understanding the entirety of this person and not about trying to do a gotcha moment with him, paging Joe Rogan or someone, like that has a broad platform and, could have an interesting conversation. At this point, I don't know if I hope he plays or hope he doesn't play, because I don't know which thing would be more powerful for him giving his voice, sort of using his voice for what he believes at this point. I think the world is in a sad and sorry state. And I wish freedom of choice, bodily autonomy, and respect for every human being in the world. And that is all I have to say for today. If you're interested in some of my more woo takes on this, join us on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, emilymoyer.locals.com. Anybody can listen. If you want to chat, become a supporter. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider becoming a patron. All my information will be in the description box. Thank you very much, guys. Have a wonderful evening.